Super Cool Radio.
Hello everyone, this is Super Cool Radio. I'm your host as always, the spirit of Super Cool Radio himself, Matthew Thomas. I got a great show lined up for you. My guest this time will be Kevin Jones of Stepchild. And before I bring on Kevin to the show, we're going to hear a rockin' song by Stepchild that is Alone at Night. Hope you guys enjoy because this song absolutely rocks. I really enjoy it. And then after Alone at Night, I'll bring on Kevin for a great interview. He's going to be talking about what Stepchild has been working on lately. Plus, he's got some great information to tell you guys. Here is Alone at Night by Stepchild.
Why won't you listen?
I got a great guest with me at this time. Please welcome from the West Coast, guitarist, singer, and songwriter for Stepchild. Please welcome Kevin Jones.
Wow, cool. Thank you for having me.
Of course, thank you so much for hanging out with me here on Super Cool Radio. Glad we were able to do this and have this interview. Before we get started, got to give a big thank you to Christina Avila for making this interview possible. Really great to work with her, so big thank you to Christina.
She's done great things for Stepchild, great things for me, and I call her the queen bee of rock and roll promotion. And she's a dear friend as well.
Definitely, for sure. Really great person who loves music and in it for the right reasons.
Absolutely.
I know we got much to discuss for this interview. Before we dive in, I got a fun question for you. If you had to recommend 2 albums people should listen to in their lifetime, which 2 would you pick?
Oh man, well, you like must-haves, huh?
Yeah.
If I had to pick 2 must-haves as far as rock and roll and metal, and if I stayed true to my roots, and I'm sure just like you, there's probably 100 albums that you could list, so it's tough to pick just 2 because I love so many types of music. I have a huge Beatle influence, so like Abbey Road and all that. But if I had to nail it down and keep it rock and roll, I would probably go with Physical Graffiti by Led Zeppelin because it's so absolutely brilliant and there's so much there and so many styles there. And, John Bonham on the drums, that's it for me as far as drums go. And obviously, Jimmy Page and John Paul Jones and Robert Plant's vocals. And it's just such an amazing album. And then for my second choice, I would have to go with Van Halen 1 because when Van Halen 1 came out, it changed everything, and rest in peace, Eddie. He was an acquaintance of mine. I got to meet him a couple times in my life. I got to jam with him for about 5 minutes one time at a NAMM show many years ago. And the Van Halen first album is just so insane, so stellar. The guitar changed the face of guitar forever. And so Van Halen 1, Physical Graffiti, Led Zeppelin.
Those are 2 incredible picks. Really, between Led Zeppelin 4 and Physical Graffiti, that was like my 2 favorite albums by Led Zeppelin. And of course, Eddie Van Halen is an incredible guitarist who, as you said, when Van Halen came out, he really changed the dynamic of guitar players and the sound and all of it.
Yeah, obviously there's all these fierce players and different genres of music, But the thing is that when Jimi Hendrix hit this planet and he was in his, prime of his career, so bummed that we lost him at 27 years old, but he was so amazing. And Jimi Hendrix absolutely changed music forever. And there's all kinds of phenomenal killer guitar players that came since then. Obviously, we could talk for hours about it. But in my mind, Jimi Hendrix, and then when Eddie Van Halen hit, that was like the game changer. And so, yeah, 2 of my favorite players, if not my 2 favorites. But it's so hard to pick because I have so many musicians that I love, from David Gilmour to Steve Vai to Gary Moore to Michael Schenker. There's just so many. That's the great thing about music is that we are all artists, right? And so it's just like people, like I'll see on Facebook, they'll be like, who wins out of Eddie and Randy Rhoads and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And the thing is that that's the beautiful thing about music and artistry. It's like you get your canvas out and you put it up and you get your paintbrushes and your paint out and you paint your picture and everybody paints a different picture. And that's what's so freaking beautiful about music is that there is nobody really better than anybody else. Is Eddie better than Hendrix? No. Is Hendrix better than Eddie? No. They're 2 completely different players, but both of them were absolutely fierce, and both of them changed guitar forever.
Oh yeah, for sure, definitely, and that is the beauty of music. It is subjective, and people they can like whatever they like, and it's always up to interpretation with music, and that's always the great part about it.
Absolutely.
So now, Kevin, you've had a very lengthy career, obviously through the decades. So I want to kind of start at the beginning. When did you know you wanted to become a musician?
Well, some of the different interviews that I've been doing lately, it's like I keep hitting the same thing. So I feel like I'm like retelling my story over again. So it's just like people that have heard a couple of my interviews are like, okay, here we go again. So I'll try to make a really long story short. I grew up in Anaheim, California, a couple miles away from Disneyland. My dad and mom were part of a choir of a Lutheran church called Grace Lutheran. Grace Lutheran School is where I went through preschool to third grade. I was singing in church when I was 5 years old. I loved singing. People would come up to my parents and they're like, we're looking at your little boy. He's not reading the hymn book. He's got his eyes closed. He's singing like full voice. And I mean, how does your little 5-6-year-old boy know all the words to these songs? It was just like blowing these people's minds around my parents, right? And so I just loved singing at church, and I loved singing in general. And my parents' best friends, the Bakers, their boy had a guitar. And after church on Sunday, we would always go to the Baker's house. That was like what we did. We'd go over there and hang out and watch football and eat food. And that was my parents' best friends. Well, when we would arrive at the house every freaking Sunday as a little kid, and I'm talking 5, 6 years old, I would run out of the car, straight through their front door, straight down the hallway, back to the back right room, underneath the bed, open up the guitar case, and I would just sit there and just strum the guitar. It was too big for me to physically pick the thing up, so I didn't take it out of the case. I would just open it up and I would just sit there and strum it. And I was absolutely in love with guitar and singing when I was 5 years old. I was in my first band when I was 12 years old. We played 3 original songs and 8 Rolling Stone songs. And the band was called High Voltage. I don't know how that had anything to do with the Stones or us, but that was the name that we came up with. And so I was born into loving singing and loving music. And then the other thing that I'll throw in there is that when I was a little kid, my parents got me a little clock radio. It was a Mickey Mouse clock radio. And they would tell me later on in my life, they're like, we would just sit there, like we'd have friends over. Everybody would be like kind of laughing and smiling because you would be in your bedroom singing along with that radio. You were singing Motown. You were singing like all those songs of back when I was a kid. I was singing along with the radio. And so I had a huge influence all the way from blues to pop to rock and roll to, to whatever, right? And so I was a singer and a guitar player since I was born.
No, it's always cool, especially starting so young with just loving the guitar, music, singing along the clock. I think that it's very cool. And obviously, thank you for sharing how you get started, which is awesome. So growing up, like as you said in Anaheim, what was kind of like the music scene like back then when you were growing up?
You mean as I started to play or as I was a kid?
Starting with like your first band when you said you were 12, then kind of going through the years.
So my parents divorced when I was 8, and my dad worked for Rockwell International in Anaheim. Rockwell International built this place called the Ziggurat Building in Laguna Niguel. And my parents split up. I went with my dad. I have an older brother named Michael that's 5 years older than me. And so when I was, 9 years old, and Michael was 14 years old, we bought a house in Mission Viejo, and we moved to Mission Viejo. And my beginning, we joined a church called Mount of Olives Church. And I don't know if you know this about me, but I play worship music at a church here in Laguna Beach. I don't know if I shared that with you when you and I talked. I've been playing worship music for about 9 years now. And so I've got my metal side to me, and I love metal, and that's my heart. And then I also love singing for the Lord. And so I get to do that. I've had a lot of fun with that, and I'm doing that. I just did, one of my old metal bands called Rattleface just did a Christian rock album, 11 songs, and I just finished recording that. That's going to be coming out on the 1st of January, and the album is called The Cross. So
No, I was not familiar with your Christian music work, but I think that's really cool to have. Obviously, you have the metal, that kind of side, but then you also have the worship side to it as well. I think that is very cool.
yeah, I'm proud of it, and I apologize for going kind of off the beaten path of your question, but like
No worries.
that, like when I moved to Mission Viejo when I was a kid, I formed, had a couple friends that I met at school, and we started this little band, and we would just like. We thought we were so cool, like we would be, because we had to walk everywhere. We weren't old enough to drive yet, right? So we would have our guitars and we would walk, and like all the kids around and stuff, they'd always see us. We were always walking with our guitars to our friend's house, that was the drummer that, we got to play in his garage of his house. And then we played like our first gig. It was like our birthday party at like a mobile home park, It was called Sesame Street Mobile Home Park in Lake Forest, California. And I was like 13 years old, and we were petrified, and we played. And so that's how it all started. Like we would just play like little birthday party, or we'd have like little concerts in our garage, and we'd invite our friends over and we'd play for them. And that's kind of where it all started for me.
It's definitely obviously very cool. Obviously playing the birthday parties and small shows. So, like, when do you think you became like actual like professional like musician?
I went to Mission Viejo High School, and in 9th grade, freshman year, I met a couple guys, and we started a band called Illusion. And Illusion, actually, we had learned about 5 hours worth of cover songs. We were doing the Zeppelin, we were doing the Black Sabbath, we were doing original songs, and we had about 5 hours of material, and we had about 30 originals. And Illusion was a really big band in Mission Viejo when I was a kid, and we were the band that like people would get for the kegger parties. And we had a stage that we built and fog machines, and basically it was like everybody knew that like if somebody's parents went away for the weekend, we would have these kegger parties in their backyards of their houses. These people would be mortified if they knew what was going on, and a lot of people probably get in trouble for doing it, right? But we were the band that at a drop of a hat and one phone call away, they could call us up, on a Saturday morning at 10 o'clock, and we could be at their house at noon with the whole entourage, with everybody playing. And so we played tons of parties, and we were called Illusion. And Illusion was my big band that was together like 3 or 4 years together while I was in high school. We reformed in 2011 and recorded an 18-song double album. All the guys, like the guitar player lives in Paris, France. He flew down 2 times. And so Illusion recorded a 18-song double album all these years later. And that was my they were like my Beatles, my Stones. We had this chemistry. We were an amazing band. And it was like the one that it was like the girl that got away. It was the band that got away. And everybody, agreed. And so I was able to put that band back together and record an album just a few years ago.
Was that all the original players who you played with in high school?
Yeah.
Wow.
The original, the drummer of Illusion is Paul Wilson, and when Stepchild formed, Paul Wilson was the drummer. So I've done a lot of different albums. I've recorded like 11 or 12 albums, and I do have different people that are part of like the different band that we work together still. And so like my bass player, Danny DeYoung, was in my second band. The second band after High Voltage was Oasis, 13 years old. My drummer in that band, Danny DeYoung, is the bass player of Stepchild today. So we have a history that goes back all the way to our childhood.
I think it's very neat to actually have those connections, as you said, you made in high school, and you're still obviously you recorded with those guys in different bands and played with those guys. I think that is very cool, and that also leads me to where I was going next, which is your current band, Stepchild. So how did that band come together, and how'd you come up with the name?
Okay, so Scott Griffith, rest his soul. Scott Griffith was the leader and the main songwriter we called him the chordsmith. He was just an amazing guitar player. So Scott Griffith from Stepchild was the main writer. And Scott and Paul Wilson from Stepchild, they had started a band that I wasn't in that was called Nightfall. Nightfall was a huge force in Orange County, and the lead singer of Nightfall, his name is Ralph Saines, aka Michael Starr from Steel Panther. Nightfall was an absolutely amazing band that was having all the labels look at them, and they had great songs, and they were absolutely phenomenal. And right around that time, like when the Seattle grunge thing hit, and they had all the labels looking at them, and they were more of a commercial rock. I don't want to say Bon Jovi, but they were like Ralph was in the band Atomic Punks after Nightfall, and he could do David Lee Roth, probably better than Dave. and so when Nightfall split apart, they decided that they wanted to go heavier, and I got the phone call, and Scott Griffith, who lost his life, God bless him, we just celebrated what would have been his birthday on November 3rd. Scott lost his life in the Rhode Island nightclub fire, the Great White Concert, and he was our leader. And the way that Stepchild got back together, Stepchild was a big band back in the early 90s. And we reformed again when Scott lost his life in that fire for his daughter Casey to do some shows to raise some money for Casey and her mom. And we ended up just loving the music so much and wanting to keep that music alive that Stepchild reformed and stayed together in his honor. And so when Nightfall split apart, Scott Griffith had this idea of the name Stepchild, and Stepchild was like a kid kind of very close to my heart, because he came from a broken home. Like in his caricature of how Scott dreamt it up in his head, right, was like a stepchild was like a kid with a chip on his shoulder, kind of pissed off, doesn't like rules, doesn't like school, kind of pissed, kind of angry, chip on his shoulder, and full-blown kind of attitude type thing. And they went from being Nightfall to taking the nucleus of Nightfall, most of the members of the band, and turned it into Stepchild and gave me the call. Now, Scott Griffith and I were in a band in high school called Mysticy, and we had a band together, and our childhood goes back where he was in a band and I was in Illusion, but we were buddies, and then we did this little side thing. And so the nucleus of Stepchild was members of this family unit of musicians that go back into my teenage years. And so it was put together, and so it's like this band of brothers. One guy might have went here and joined that band, one guy might have joined this band, and then we'd end up back together, and we always kept ending up back together.
It's very interesting how, obviously, as you said, people go to do different things, but they always kind of come back or always have those connections with those people, which I think is just awesome. Just to be able to continue to work with those people. I know obviously it's some situations where bands, people do their separate things and they don't like each other, but it's nice to actually have those connections. You guys are still obviously playing together and doing things, which I think is very neat. And it's cool, obviously you guys reformed, to honor a member, and I think that's very cool, and you guys are still doing it. And I did hear you guys are currently working on some new music for Stepchild. So how is that going?
It's just amazing, and Stepchild is about to open a new chapter. We're writing and recording all brand new songs. I had shared with you before we went on the air that I just got back from Los Angeles. I live in Laguna Beach, California, in Orange County, but we found a deal on a Roland electronic drum kit, and our guitar player, Mike Moore from Stepchild, has a home converting his part of his house into a recording studio and a rehearsal studio. I've got where I'm sitting right here, right now. I'm in my recording studio at my house, but I'm in an apartment complex in Laguna, and you can't really make too much noise. I mean, I get away with it, but I record direct into the, I record direct into the board, right? And so right now, we just got back about an hour ago from buying just a badass Roland electronic drum kit, which we will be in, and we'll be writing and recording new songs, which we've already been working on a few months now. But now we're going to have a designated studio where we have a full-blown studio where we can go and be there, 7 nights a week if we want to. And so the new songs are a little more heavy. They're more heavy-footed. It's a little more metal. Stepchild's a metal band, but it's more of a hard rock band with a metal edge to it. And the new Stepchild is definitely more on the metal side. It's harder edged than the old Stepchild stuff.
I definitely am very excited to hear some new music from Stepchild. I think it's very cool. So obviously you guys have, as you said, your own recording studio. Do you think it's more like comfortable to have like your own studio that you can do stuff at your own pace?
Absolutely. And so like for our rehearsals, if you don't have a lockout, you're going to blow about $30 to $35 an hour at a rehearsal place, right? And that adds up quickly. And so, it's like if you practice 2-3 nights a week and that's $300, right? And you're blowing $1,200 a month just to go into somebody else's place. And so we were going to go into into a commercial center and just get our own studio. And we were going to blow whatever, $1,200, $1,500 a month. And our guitar player was like, man, why don't we just take my garage of my home, put everything in storage and build a studio out there. And as long as we don't have acoustic drums and we use electronic drums, and then we can actually, one of the great things that a lot of people are doing now is that we're going to go in there and we're going to work out the new songs and we're going to record demos, right? Then we'll go into a full-blown real recording studio, right? And we'll bring the band in there and we'll bring in an acoustic drum kit and we'll get just the drums. That's all we need there, okay? If you have big, fat, huge killer drums, you can take them home. We can do the whole rep, my vocals, the guitar, the bass, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can do that all on your own at home. The big thing is that we can't really, for one, you have to have a boatload of killer mics and you have to have the right room and you have to be in a situation where you're not pissing your neighbors off, blowing drums out, slamming acoustic drums, especially if it takes a few hours to get them or whatever. And so that's the perfect thing put together, is that we're going to write the stuff, get it ready, demo it, be ready to do it, go into a full-blown studio, do acoustic drums, bring those drums back home and start laying the tracks on them and finish the record in our own studio. And that's going to save us a boatload of money too. And you don't have to rush. Stand in front of the mic where you're looking at the wall and you're like, hey, I'm not singing good right now. This sucks. We just spent $50 and I didn't get a vocal track tonight, right? Instead, it's like, hey, man, I'll see you tomorrow. Just come back tomorrow. I'll try it again. It takes all that pressure off of being at a studio that's $100 an hour and you're looking at your watch, you're looking at the wall, and you're like, oh, shit, this is like, we didn't get a vocal tonight now. And then the rest of the band's back there in the board, right? And they're like, oh my God, you know what I mean? Because it's money. So when you have your own studio, you alleviate all that stress and, or you can have an idea and you're like, you know what? Because I'm also a guitar player, right? It's like you can have an idea and you can just like run over to the studio and hit record and lay down a lick, and come back and revisit it. So we're super, super excited and grateful that we're going to have this new studio for Stepchild.
Yeah, Dad, I'm very happy for you guys. Sounds like a really great operation for you guys, and especially alleviating that pressure of, having, I have to get this track done tonight, or, we only have money to do this amount of days. I think it really helps, and you guys can actually get like the best out of each other in that atmosphere.
And technology is actually starting to change, and even though we will not be using electronic drums, it's like this Roland drum kit. We got a TD11 drum kit tonight, and we went in and checked it before we bought it, obviously, right? Big, huge, fat kick, big, huge snare. I mean, the drums sound freaking killer. The ride cymbal, the hi-hat, the technology of today. I'm not saying that we're going to necessarily use it for the album, but we might. I mean, it sounds killer. I mean, I was blown away on what. And the other thing is that was just off of the that was off the sounds that are already built into the Roland, right? We're using in our studio Logic Pro X, where we can just plug each one of those drums in, and we can make the kick drum or the snare or anything we want, and we have thousands of different things to pick from. And so even if it is just a demo and the drums, don't make the album that we do as we're working and writing them, it's still going to sound totally ridiculous, killer, So we're super excited. We got great gear, we got great personnel. Mike Moore, our guitar player, he was well known for a band called Mr. Crowley, Ozzy tribute. That's still going. He's no longer in that band, but he was the original guitar player for Mr. Crowley out of California. And Mike Moore is just a freaking monster guitar player. He has killer licks, killer chops, killer gear, killer image. He's a great bro, great friend, super cool person. And Danny DeYoung on bass and me. And we brought in an old friend of ours, KJ Hunter, on drums. He played drums with George Lynch from Lynch Mob and a lot of other people. He's been around. He's from the Mission Viejo crowd. It's kind of important to us to have kind of like, we're trying to keep it family, And so there's been some member changes here just in the last year and a half. And we're going to record this album. We're going to try to release it around the 1st of February, 2022. Our first show coming back is, at least for now, we're opening for Loudness, the Japan metal band Loudness. Yep. We're opening for Loudness Sunday, March 20th at the Whiskey in Hollywood. And that's going to be a CD release party for us as well that night.
Wow, that sounds like a killer show. I've heard, I've listened to Loudness. I've interviewed some people who open for them, and I've heard they're phenomenal live. Loudness.
Now, many years ago, I had this it was like more of a side project band. What were we called? Oh my God, it was called such a stupid name. I'm embarrassed to even say it. We were called Loose Cannon. Right? Now, Loose Cannon was KJ Hunter, the guy that I brought in on drums, okay? And Danny DeYoung, my bass player, and then a guy named Pete DeMarza on guitar. And we played the Roxy. And I get off, and this is freaking years ago, right? And I get off stage, and this man walks up to me in a full suit and tie, executive dude, And he goes, "Excuse me, could I have a minute with you?" And I said, "Sure." I thought he was going to be like with a label or, "Hey, we like your band, we want to sign you," or whatever. And he goes, "I'm the manager of the band Loudness, and they're here, and they really like you, and they're looking for a singer, and they were wondering if you could come over and meet them. They'd like to talk with you, right?" So I was like, "What?" So I just got off stage at the Roxy, right? And I'm freaking sweaty and stuff, And that's what it was. The monitor guy was like, "Hey," so they kind of called me over the side, and then the guy asked if I could come out. So I kind of dried myself off, walked up to the dude that wanted to talk to me. He pulls me over to this booth in the back of the Roxy. Are you familiar with the Roxy? It's next to the Rainbow. It's on the Sunset Strip in Hollywood.
Yeah, I know where it is. I've never been there, but I know it.
The Rainbow. That's like kind of the heart of the Sunset Strip, right? So anyhow, I walk up and I walk back to this booth, and there's all the guys in Loudness. And they they really didn't speak English. And this was a lot of years ago, right? But they were interested in having me audition for them. And as the conversation started, the manager of the band said that if I was to take the gig, that I would have to relocate to Japan to do the album. And they were like, "We love your voice." And they were like, they had an interpreter. The manager was interpreting for me. So I'm just sitting there and they're talking. I have no idea what they're saying, right? And they're shaking their heads and nodding at me, right? And he's like, "They really like your voice. They really like your image and all that. They really like you to consider being their new singer. And they want you to come to Japan." And I was like, "I really appreciate this, but I said, I just don't think it's, for me." And so I turned him down, and I didn't take it. And so cut to all these years later, I get to open for him, and I don't really know that much about them anymore. I haven't looked to see if it's original members or what the deal is, but I love their music. They're a kick-ass band. They're a kick-ass band. And I don't really know that much about them anymore. I haven't looked to see if it's original members or what the deal is, but I love their music. They're a kick-ass band. And I don't really know that much about them anymore. I haven't looked to see if it's original members or what the deal is, but I love their music. They're a kick-ass band. And I don't really know that much about them anymore. I haven't looked to see if it's original members or what the deal is, but I love their music. They're a kick-ass band. And I don't really know that much about them anymore. I haven't looked to see if it's original members or what the deal is, but I love their music. They're a kick-ass band. And I don't really know that much about them anymore. I haven't looked to see if it's original members or what the deal is, but I love their music. They're a kick-ass band. And I don't really know that much about them anymore. I haven't looked to see if it's original members or what the deal is, but I love the ass metal band. I think they're the greatest Japanese metal band ever. And Stepchild playing with them at the Whiskey Sunday, March 20th, 2022. And I'm super stoked to open for them and to do a gig with them.
Yeah, it sounds like an absolutely amazing show, especially, Stepchild and Loudness, plus it's your CD release party. So, like, if anyone's curious, if anyone's interested, what can they expect from a Stepchild show, especially first show back?
Heavier. It's going to be heavier. It's more like the old Stepchild was more like a Guns N' Roses, Alice in Chains, and I don't want to I hate to put like a title on it, but like we were more straightforward rock, AC/DC, Guns N' Roses, and all that. And that's our heart. I mean, that's still our backbone. But I think that people will see that there's more of the. I don't want to necessarily say we're not going to full hardcore like Pantera or anything like that, but it's going to be harder edged music. So it's going to be more like an Iron Maiden, Judas Priest. It's going to be more metal versus hard rock on the new Stepchild.
I'm definitely looking forward to listening to it. It sounds like a great show with Loudness coming up in March of 2022. So it sounds like that's going to be a fun time. So, like, kind of wrapping up this interview, I got just a few more things I want to talk about. So, like, what is the writing process of Stepchild? How do you guys build a song?
Well, it usually starts with the guitar riff. And then, like, even if we just go in and lay the guitar riff down with just a click track, okay? And so whether it's me, whether it's Mike, Danny DeYoung is also, Danny was, I might have mentioned, and I did mention in the beginning that he started as my drummer when we were 13 years old. And so having Danny start on drums and now be a bass player, right? He really plays with killer timing and all that. And he, Danny, our bass player, is actually writing a lot of the guitar parts for the new album, along with Mike and I. But he's really the backbone of the band. And he has fierce, just simplistic, badass guitar ideas. And so what he'll do is he'll lay down my battery's getting low, I guess. He will lay down a guitar riff and send it over to me. And I've got Logic Pro here at my recording studio at my house, right? And then I'll take it and I'll throw my mic up and I'll hit record and I'll throw a vocal down and I'll send it back in MP3 and he'll attach it in. And we can actually throw tracks back and forth with each other because he has Logic Pro X, I have Logic Pro X, Mike Moore has Logic Pro X. Now we're going to have a dedicated studio. And so we'll be able to fly tracks back and forth if we choose to, right? So it starts with a killer guitar riff. Then we throw down a scratch vocal. Then we throw down like a bass and we throw drums, right? And we just kind of get the vibe going. Then we'll use that scratch recording as the backbone to go in and actually lay it, right? And have the drummer and the bass player lay the tracks. So we have the drums and the bass, and then we start adding guitars, and then we add the vocals, and then we add all the nuances, and we do the backup vocals and all that. But it starts with a guitar riff.
It's always very cool. That's why I always ask people, kind of how do they build a song? And obviously for you with your lyrics and vocals, do you like listen to the guitar riff and then kind of build the vocals, the lyrics, or do you have like ideas for lyrics already in mind?
Both. So the answer is both. And so a lot of times I will just have an inspiration and a thought, and I'll just grab a piece of paper and a pen, and I prefer to like literally write it with a pen and paper instead of like going to my computer and typing it. When I type something, like I'll usually write it on paper and then maybe I'll type it down so I have it, but a lot of the songs that I've written, like I wake up in the middle of the night with song ideas, and sometimes I don't get up and the song is lost forever, and sometimes I'm like half asleep and I'll have this great idea and I was like, dude, you gotta get up, you gotta write that down, man, or you're gonna forget it. And I'll get out of bed, and like sometimes, and this has been happening, people that know me, and especially ex-girlfriends of mine, etc., it's like I am known for like waking up in the morning with like paper next to me, and I'll be like, whoa, and I'll be like reading these lyrics, and I won't even remember writing them. Like, I'll literally get up in the middle of the night and write a song, go back to sleep, and wake up the next morning with a freaking Christmas present next to me of like some killer idea of a song. And sometimes I'll think, oh yeah, that was a dream I had. Like, a lot of times I'll have a dream, and then I'll wake up from the dream, and then that will inspire me to like maybe write down the story or what type of dream I had, which then turns into a story and turns into a lyric. So sometimes I'll just take that lyric, right, and I'll think about the storyline, and then I'll grab my guitar and I'll try to write something that encompasses what the vibe is, right? So sometimes the lyric comes first, but with a lot of different people, depending on whether I'm playing guitar or if I'm just a lead singer in the band, in some of the bands I just sing, I don't play in, right? And they send me a CD or email me songs, right? And the music's already there. And some of the people I work with, like Ron Sachs from Rattleface, he sends me basically an album that's like almost ready to mix and put out with no vocals on it. Big fat drums, killer bass, killer guitars, strings, keyboards, guitar synthesizers, and it's killer. And then all I got to do is go in and drag it into my Logic Pro, do an MP3 file, start doing scratch vocals, get ready, then go down to his studio and actually do the final vocals on it. So a lot of people give me full-blown songs that all they need is the vocals written to it. And that's just a piece of cake, you know? It makes it so easy.
Yeah, definitely, I bet. And it's kind of cool. Like, I'm kind of the same way. Like, if I'm laying in bed and like if I'm like I was struggling like editing a video or something, I'll be like, I'll be like, you know what? I just thought of this idea. I'm gonna get up and I just gotta do it because I know it's gonna bother me all night if I don't like go fix it or like do this idea. So like I've done that like many times. Or like I was struggling with to think of something. And I'm like, wow, 3 a.m, great time for the mind to kick in and actually do this.
Yeah.
But I'm going to wrap up this interview because I know obviously as you said your battery's getting low, and we'll wrap this up. But before we go, so as you kind of said, you got the new album dropping for Stepchild, and you got the album release party coming up in March. So if anyone's interested, where can they find the Stepchild online?
So if you go to youtube.com/Kevin Jones Rocks, that has like all my different bands and probably 9 or 10 Stepchild songs. And if you go to scottgriffith.org, which was the leader of our band, where it all started, the backbone of the band, rest his soul, we miss him so much, and just love what he gave us. These songs were gifts from him that we continue to play in his honor. And that's scottgriffith.org. It's SCOTTGRIFFITH.org. Then you can go to Reverb Nation, Reverb Nation Stepchild and the number 6. I don't know why I picked it. I wish I would have picked a different digit or whatever, but it was like there was some other band. There's a couple other Stepchilds out there that have tried to snag our name. They're all totally lame. Like, sorry guys, but whatever. There's one Stepchild and it's my band. So that's right. All the other ones, but whatever. So like I went in and then I think it's going to be changing to Stepchild Rocks. But one thing that I did want to share with you, and it'll probably be stepchildrocks.com. I'll have to catch you back. But if you go to reverbnation.com, Stepchild, the number 6, you can find our music. It's free to download. There's videos there. If you go to Kevin Jones Rocks on YouTube, you can find Stepchild in my solo album, like all my other bands. I'm also going to be doing a new album with my old band, Distilled Spirits, that I did a record with, and a bunch of my stuff is there. And then I wanted to share with you that for our CD release on March 20th at the Loudness show, we're going to have a full-blown brand new website. We're going to have caps, we're going to have t-shirts. We're going to have, I'm also talking, a lot of people have asked me to put the old Stepchild album out because I never really did that, you know? And so if we end up doing that and we end up releasing the actual first Stepchild album, then all the people that were involved and like Scott's family and the different people that were part of it, everything would be split absolutely evenly. You know, I've never made a penny off of Stepchild, literally ever. It was never about money for me. in my career, it was always about just the love of music and out there playing, you know? And so at this point, we are going to write a new album with new songs, and we're going to release that album. We're going to sell that album, and we got a new logo that's badass, and we're going to have some killer shirts, some killer hats, and we're going to try to make a little money with it. On top of the real reason we do it, which is the love of the music.
Definitely, that all sounds really great. I'm going to leave some links, the links you said in the description. I look forward to the new album. I think I like the idea of releasing the first album and obviously splitting it evenly. I think that's a great idea. I think it's to honor everyone who was part of it.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It means a lot to me. Thank you, Christina Avila, the queen of rock and roll promotion out on the East Coast. God bless her heart. She's been so great for me and for my career. She's getting me all kinds of interviews, and she's a very special friend. I talk to her pretty much every day on the phone, and she just works her you-know-what off for us. She works her tail off for us, you know. She's very selfless, and when this all happens, like when we have the new album, we have the hats and all that, I'm bringing Christina Avila onto our payroll. So she's going to be like, I can't say an equal member, not like a band member, but she's going to be rewarded. And she doesn't do it for money. She does it because she loves our band, and she's like a sister to me. But thank you, Christina, for introducing me to you. It's Matthew, right, that you go by, not Matt?
Yes, Matthew.
Yeah. I so appreciate you having me on. Thanks, bro.
Of course, before I sign off, definitely a big thank you to Christina Avila. Real great time chatting with you, Kevin. And as you said, I couldn't say it any better. She does everything because she loves music, and she loves promoting music, and just everything involving music she loves. And she has some really great bands on her roster and talented musicians as well. So definitely check out everything she is doing as well. But for Kevin Jones, I am Matthew Thomas. Thank you so much for watching and listening to Super Cool Radio, and stay frosty.
Watch it for Stepchild. We're coming at you.